Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let me down. I don't think you guys can see the bottom of this. Here's the bottom. I don't know if you can see that or not. Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let me down. Forgive me for what I do, but if you want bread, well, it's up to you. Don't let me down, fancy. Mama's gonna move you uptown. Down, down, down. Down. My microwave just went off. Uno momento. Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let me down. All right. I think I've got everything. I promised somebody last night that I would juggle while we're waiting on people to join, so I have to juggle now. Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let me down. Right, ignore this for right now. Hi, everybody. All right, so ground rules. Number one, don't send me questions during the video because the writing is too small. Number two, I've neglected to do this for the past 2 nights, so let me start with this. I have a Venmo. I learned what Venmo was like on Monday. So now we have a Venmo. If I knew that it was going to just name it my name, then I would have made it something different like Campbell's Bakery, but I had no idea because who knows what Venmo is. So if anybody wants to make a donation for the crew, for our people here, then please do. But we're using Venmo for bread sales and for donuts over at the other location. So for it to go to the crew, you have to put the crew on it. Now, remember how we talked about everything is backwards? So like my best dad ever mug is backwards, but look at this, it's forwards. That's because I wrote it backwards, huh? Check it out. It looks great. I mean, maybe the crew part. Can you see it? It's not that bad, but it's Dodd, that's my name, dash Moore. Dodd dash Moore. Dodd Mitchell Moore, the one and only. So I'm going to set that back here. And again, 100% of that goes to the crew. So nothing for us. But what are we here for? Sourdough. And I have to tell you guys, it's looking pretty good. Let me see. I'm going to give it a nice stir. I'm using a stick this time, so nobody can say, hey, you keep using a fancy red-handled, heat-resistant, restaurant-style spatula to stir with, and I don't have one of those, Mitchell. So I'm just using this. But let me show you Reba. Look at that. I mean, there are bubbles and stuff here. It's just, that is great. Different colors happening. So that's wonderful. And then Fancy also, here, hold on. Fancy is looking great. I mean, she is fantastic. So here's your one chance, Fancy, don't let me down. All right, so we're gonna feed first and then we'll get to biscuits because feeding will take all of whatever, a minute. Let's do Reba first because she always goes second. It's just not fair. I know, I hear you. So I've got Reba right here. I'm going to pour in some flour, a pretty good bit this time. If you noticed, we started with 50 grams of flour for Fancy and 50 mils of water. Then the next day was 75. Today we're going to do 100. So we're basically giving it more food every day because we're trying to grow that culture. That's the whole purpose. So I've got some flour down in there, a pretty good bit actually. And then I'm going to add some water and give it a quick stir with this wooden dowel that has not been disinfected. So, let's see. It's okay. I think it needs more water. So I'm going to do that. And then, all right, yeah. This is a nice, so that you guys can kind of see the texture. Oh, I tell you what I can do. I just need something to pour this in. So now we're at the point where you want to change your starter into a different container, one that you can keep it in. Again, this is my starter. Actually, let me come around and show you guys this. So I keep this at room temp and I feed it every day. Today when I fed it, it was right here at the level of the tape. And you see how much it's grown. And then also if I can open it up, I think you guys can see, here let me try to, I think you guys can see all of those thousands of bubbles and just deliciousness. So that's what we are all working towards. And you can do it. I promise. So we've got fancy done. So that you can kind of see the texture. Oh, Reba. Aw, Reba. I'm sorry. I called you fancy. I mean, you're twins, and you do look a lot alike. I know. I'm sorry. So that you can see the texture of Reba, I will pour it into a different container. So that's what Reba looks like. And now we can do fancy. So there's Reba. We'll set her off to the side. She's going to be in the tall container, which is called a sixth pan. And the shorter sixth pan is going to have fancy. I'll label them later. All right, so fancy, come on. She gets an exact amount, 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water, or 100 milliliters of water. And then we stir fancy up. Now yours may have nothing. It may look completely like nothing's happening. That's okay. Your house is just too clean. Or you keep your air conditioner on all the time and it's filtering out stuff. Who knows? But give it time. Keep feeding it and keep it open. Don't cover it. Unless tomorrow, which about the fourth day, if it's starting to show bubbles and starting to smell a little vinegary, then you can go ahead and transfer it into a new container and lightly cover it. Where's mine? So this jar typically has a rubber seal that goes around it, but I took that off so that there's still a little bit of air can kind of get into it. But here is fancy. Now, I'm going to have to use a spatula for this because fancy is much thicker. And you'll see, fancy is much thicker than Reba is. There's so many jokes right now, but I know kids are watching, so I can't say any of them. But you can see here, that's much thicker. Yours may get a skin on top of it. That's fine. Stir it right in. It doesn't matter. Remember, thousands of years, plains of the Serengeti. That's all you have to remember. So, the feeding part has been done now. It's over. Now we can move on to biscuits. Let me move this over here. Okay, so I have my recipe right here, which bakers call a formula. I don't actually think that you can see the bottom of it, so let me pick it up and put it right here. So, you will need, to make our biscuits, 2 cups of AP, 2 2 teaspoons of bee powder, baking powder, half teaspoon of bee soda. Huh? What you think it is? Baking soda. 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of ice cold buttermilk, and 8 tablespoons of melted butter, which is also a stick. So trying to make it very straightforward for you so that you don't have to remember how many ounces and how many grams and how much butter do I use. You don't have to measure it. You can just use 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of buttermilk, and 8 tablespoons of melted butter. Go ahead and melt your butter first, and I will fill time while you're doing that. Let's see. I can give you interesting facts about nothing. I got nothing. Sorry about that. But you do need to melt your butter, and it does need it needs to be melted, but not like boiling hot. So if you melt it to where there's still a little whole butter down in there, or if you're using margarine, use margarine, but you don't want it to be totally melted because then it'll just be too hot. If you take it out of the microwave, it will continue to melt that big amount. So just let it melt down, but don't get it boiling hot. Then you want to take your buttermilk. Where's my buttermilk? I think my buttermilk is in the freezer already. You want to put your buttermilk in the freezer because you want it to be cold, 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 cold when we introduce it to the butter, or the butter to it. So cold, cold, cold. Put your cup of buttermilk in the freezer now, and then melt your butter or margarine, but not completely to where it's boiling hot. You just need it to be liquid. I'm going to put mine back in the freezer. Oh, this looks like more than a cup. Some of you eagle-eyed people out there may have noticed, that looks like an awfully big cup. That's because it is. I think for the camera, I need a larger amount so you guys can see it easier, so I made more. But put that in your freezer, melt your butter. Here's mine. I've got it chilling out, coming basically to room temp. It was melted, and now it was hot, so now it's cooling down. Yeah, smart. So in the meantime, I need to get, that spatula will work. There's nothing on there except a little sourdough culture. So I've got my 2 cups of flour. It's really 4 cups of flour. Remember, I'm doubling everything. Just go with it. 2 cups of flour right here. I'm gonna put that there. Then, where is my, here we go. I need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I actually need 4 for my recipe. So, baking powder. 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4 on the teaspoon, I'm just going to do 1 tablespoon and then 1 teaspoon. And that will be my 4 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking soda, yours is going to look different because you don't own a bakery. But I need half of a teaspoon of bee soda. That means a whole teaspoon for me because I'm doubling it. Now, let's do this though. Let's say that you're at home and you have your teaspoon and you get some huge heaping teaspoon like that. That's not a teaspoon. That's more than a teaspoon. So don't do that. We need a teaspoon. Well, you need a half a teaspoon. Don't follow recipes that say heaping teaspoon. Nobody knows what that is. It doesn't make any sense. So there's my teaspoon. Now, It also says a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I don't usually use a full teaspoon of salt, but I tried to make it easy for you guys to remember, so I went with solid numbers on everything. Typically, I use a little less than a teaspoon. It's just my thing. You can use the full teaspoon, however, and that's not going to be bad. I need 2, however, teaspoons. Now, if you are one of my favorite people who has a kitchen scale, a teaspoon weighs 5 grams. Yep, teaspoon weighs 5 grams. So you just need whatever. If you need 1 teaspoon of salt, you need 5 grams of salt. Again, doubling everything. Now for the magic. When our grandmothers made biscuits, they did a thing with their hands where they put the butter in there cold and they did it around, and through the magic of grandmotherhood or southern womanhood, they made perfect biscuits. Can you do that? I can't do that. I own a bakery and I can't do it. So we have to figure out a different way to do things. What we're looking for is little pea-sized bits of butter that will sprinkle their way throughout our biscuit dough. And the way to do that is to basically treat it like we're going to clot the butter. Horrible word, I know. Some people don't like the word moist. I don't like the word clot. It just, but it's basically what we're doing. So I'm going to get my ice cold buttermilk, my 1 cup of ice cold buttermilk, and my 8 tablespoons, which is also a stick. So you just put a stick of butter. And let me come around so that you guys can see what's going to happen here. Cold buttermilk, ice, room temperature butter. I'm going to, oh, the timer went off in the back. That's because I own a bakery and I'm baking, and we always set timers for stuff. Give me a sec. All is well. So, where was I? Oh yeah, the magic. So, take your room temp melted butter and your ice cold buttermilk and pour it in. And then stir it around. If you have a rubber spatula, that's best, but you don't have to. And then look at what it does. What do you think it does? A cold medium with a warm fat going into it, it makes these little globules. Look at that. It's like perfect little clots of butter. That's wonderful. That's exactly what we need. Look at those. They're like perfectly pea-sized bits of butter. How wonderful. Now, I didn't stir all of this together. Some of you may notice that. That means that you've watched way too much television or read way too many cookbooks, and they've convinced you that some things matter that really don't. We're making biscuits. Your grandmother made biscuits. Her grandmother probably made biscuits. Here in Mississippi, I don't even know how many generations that goes back, but a long way. Don't worry about it. Just pour it in. Now, you are going to have to follow along. Normally I say something like, this is the hard part, and then it's really not, because I'm just making fun of you because you're all civilians who can't cook. But this time I mean it. This is going to be the hard part, so you have to follow along. No joke. No kidding. You really do have to follow along. This is the hardest part about making biscuits, what we're about to do right now, and that is the mixing. I'm going to come around so you can see. All right, I am going to mix it once. I'm going to stir it around, mix it again. I'm kind of folding it. Oh, got to hold it up higher. I'm going to stir it around and mix it again. So what is that, 3 times? Here's a 4th time. Stir it around, mix it. And at this point, I'm going to stop. All right? Here, let me put a glove on so you guys can see what this actually is. So, what's going on right now? We are severely under mixing our dough because that's what you have to do. Just imagine that I, lovable Mitchell, is there. Is there? No. Imagine that I am there at your house, in your kitchen, with you as you're making your biscuits. And you get to this point, which is very obviously some dry, you see dry bits of flour falling, and you're going to think to yourself, but I have to keep mixing that because I've got dried flour in it. Well, just imagine me right there in your kitchen, and I say something like, "Stop! What are you doing? You're gonna kill your biscuits. Do you want tough biscuits? No, nobody wants tough biscuits. You want light, fluffy, soft biscuits. So stop. Just put an end to it. You don't need to mix it anymore. It's fine. It's just going to be wonderful. If you overmix your biscuits, they will be very tough, and nobody wants that. Everybody has the story of, oh, I remember when my mom or my grandmother or whoever made the first biscuits for our family, and they were rock hard, or they were so tough, or whatever the case may be. So now, see, this is what happens when you're trying to do a video and don't have any idea what you're doing. Have other skills that don't involve making videos and cooking on videos, because I need a disher. You don't need a disher. A disher really helps. A disher is an ice cream scoop, by the way. I am going to run back there and get a disher, which means while I'm gone, you're going to miss me. That's, thing one, obviously. But that also means that it's just going to kind of be dead. So, but you still have to give me a sec, because it is what it is. I really need a disher. And then I'll show you how to do it even if you don't have a disher. But to do that, I need a pan, which I also don't have. I was going to try to not mention that part and just run back to the back, grab a disher and a pan. And you would just forget all about, oh, look, you got a pan, but I didn't do that. All right, think to yourself this song while I'm gone. Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let me down. Forgive me for what I do, but if you want bread, well, it's up to you. Alrighty, everybody. I'm going to move the recipe, the formula right now, so that I can show you. Well, I'm going to have to do it up higher. So I've got my biscuits. I scoop and then kind of flatten it, and then onto, normally I would have parchment paper here, but I didn't want to take the time to do it. So if you have parchment paper, great. If not, spray your pan, and then another one, and then. Now you see I'm scooping my way through my dough. That's further mixing it. If we had mixed it all the way, then when I pull this disher through every time, I'm further mixing it. So that's going to cause really tough biscuits. And you don't want that. You want gloriously soft biscuits. But you're saying to yourself, Mitchell, what if I don't have a disher? Well, if you don't, here, I'm also going to, you see I've got these kind of dome-shaped biscuits. I'm just going to take my hand and pat it down. Da-da-dun, like that, to make it more flat, biscuit shaped. But Mitchell, I hear you say, what if I don't have a disher? Number one, I would probably call pish posh on that. Pish posh, you've got a disher. Might not be the size that you want for the biscuits that you want to make, but you've got a disher. But we'll go with the whole, I don't have an ice cream scoop in my house. I'm like the one American in America who doesn't have an ice cream scoop. Don't know how that happens. But just do it with your hands. But be gentle. So think of it as a disher. So you're not trying to grab a whole bunch and press it down and compress it. You're just trying to grab some and then shape it gently into a biscuit. See how gentle that is? And then set it on your pan. Grab some more. Here. I'm not looking at the camera, so I don't actually know if you can see what I'm doing. And then I'm basically kind of transferring it from one hand to another. I'm not pressing on it. Once you press on it, you are causing tough biscuits. So you got to be gentle with these, all right? Now the beautiful thing about these biscuits is, number one, how easy they are. Number two, they freeze incredibly well. What we do at the bakery is we make our biscuits like whatever, hundreds of them at a time, and then we put them on a sheet pan and we wrap them and date them and we freeze them. And that way we can put them straight into a hot oven from the freezer. You don't even have to thaw them out. How great is that? So here we go. We've got all that done. Just pretend that I kept going. And at the end, you'll want to cook these on a high temperature, probably about 400 degrees for about 12 minutes. So I say about because who knows? Maybe your oven cooks really hot. Maybe the laws of time are different. I don't know. I make cookies for a living. Give me a break. So make your biscuits. Freeze them if you want to. Wrap them up. Put them in the freezer. They will be great. There is a, what's it called? Mary B. Mary B's biscuits. Remember? Those are frozen. You get them in the frozen section. And you keep them in your freezer. And then you heat up your oven. You put frozen biscuits in the oven and you cook them. You could do the same thing, only they'd be biscuits that you made. Oh, I do have my milk here that we were going to turn into buttermilk. So I'll show you how to do that real quick and then we'll be done. Milk. Is that a cup of milk? I don't know. I didn't measure it out. These are not things that matter. If you Google it, it will tell you a tablespoon of vinegar for every cup of milk. And that's how you make buttermilk. Or you could just pour some vinegar into some milk, and that's really how you make buttermilk. Nobody cares about this. These are not things that matter. These are things that television tries to make you think are so important. Milk. How much was that? Who knows? Who cares? It's just going to be buttermilk. And then put a top on it. Super strong, like I am. And mix it up. And then set it off to the side. That's going to be buttermilk. Kind of. It's actually going to be curdled milk. Whereas buttermilk is cultured milk. Different show. So, last but not least... Oh, my biscuits. I baked up some earlier, and so I can show you what you'll end up with. These, I'm coming around again. So when your biscuits go into the oven and right when they come out, brush a little melted butter on top of them, and you too will have beautiful, edible, delicious biscuits. Look at the inside though. Look at that. I mean, how great is that? That is the way to a Southerner's heart right there. And this thing is as soft and non-tough as you can possibly imagine. So, wonderful, wonderful, easy, delicious, homemade biscuits. Now, you too can feed your family check that out. Hey, this is already starting to curdle, which is great. That's because I added such a precise amount of vinegar to such a precise amount of milk, right? Pickle biscuits. I am going to try that. I really am. I'm going to use regular milk, maybe even heavy cream, and I'm going to add pickle juice to it. And I'm going to let that curdle, and then I'm going to make some biscuits. And I'm going to eat those biscuits because I bet those will be delicious. One last peek. Remember, Fancy is shorter and Reba is taller. You can also see now, because I'm not measuring anything with Reba, she's not as big, as tall as Fancy is. So now that I see that, and she's a lot thinner, nope, I'm not going to mess with it. Because if you were at home and you weren't watching this, you would not have Fancy to look at and compare it to. So we're just going to keep it just like it is. I'm not going to cover it again. I really don't like covering my sourdough starter when I'm making it for like, I don't know, a week, you know. So I'm not going to cover these again. I'm just going to leave these out. We'll set them over here. I will have them labeled when I see you tomorrow. I don't know what you guys need to know as far as like cooking. So write me, let me know. I can show you something else tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we're going to be feeding again. So you need about 150 grams of flour, which is a little more than a cup, and about 150 grams of water, which I don't know how much that is. So, but that's what you need. If you have any questions, feel free to write and let me know. And I will see you tomorrow night at 7, and we will continue along our sourdough journey so that you can feed your family whenever you need to. Don't depend on the stores being open. We're all kind of preppers now. We're all preppers now. We have to be able to do this. We don't want to have to depend on the grocery store anymore. One last thing I will say is when we get ready to make our bread, some of us are going to have a Dutch oven at your house, a cast iron Dutch oven. If you do, that's great. If you don't, a Pyrex bowl, as long as it's not the new Pyrex that's going to break at 500 degrees. Don't use that. I'm totally serious. If you don't know if you have the new Pyrex, just assume that you do and don't use it. But I will be showing you how to use Pyrex if that's what you want. I always use a Dutch oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven, really any pot with a lid that you can put in the oven is great. But you don't have to. Again, plains of the Serengeti, okay? So if you don't have a Dutch oven, don't fret. I'm going to bake 2 loaves, maybe even 3, and I'll bake one without a Dutch oven. It'll just be baked like on a pan so that you can see. I don't want anybody to stress over that. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys. So, end of the video. Close your eyes.